Right.
Poof.
Yep, poof, you're there.
And
Good
I
morning,
felt,
everybody. Happy Monday. We are in the third week of March already. Is that crazy? Um, I am, you'll notice that Valerie's not here today, but I have a very special guest that I can't wait to have her share with you some of her journey. This is Katie Antares, and she was an Action Zone participant a couple of years ago, actually, before the pandemic even. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us who you are, where you're from, a little bit about your military service.
Thanks a lot, Rosie. Yeah, I was actually in the last cohort that finished right before COVID. So it was kind of a exciting and scary time, but I'm really glad we got to finish because as Rosie said, I was in the military. I was an Arabic language interrogator, and I actually came home with some injuries. So I'm a disabled veteran now. And through that process, I went to the VA for my health care, for physical therapy, actually. And it wasn't the best therapy that I thought it should be. So I decided to become a therapist myself. So I became a physical therapist, and I went into private practice for several years before taking my skills back to the VA. And, you know, everything was going along well. In 2017, I decided to start my own business. I always had wanted to. I thought, you know, this is something that I'm destined to do. So I set up Motion Craft Therapy, limited liability company, and did absolutely nothing with it while I was in Texas. And it wasn't until I came out here to St. Petersburg, Florida, after a few months being here, I got hooked up with Action Zone, and it really kind of changed the course of things, and things have kind of run like a freight train ever since.
It's so funny because I still remember when we met, with the first time we talked on the phone, and you and Sheree came into the office, and it was your reaction to the resources that were available, not through just Action Zone, but through all of our collaborating partners in the Hillsborough County ECC, was like so many others. It's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this was here, and this might really help.
Yeah, it really is special too, because anywhere else I've been, I haven't found resources. Of course, there are veterans resources. Where I was in Temple, Texas, Fort Hood's right there. So you would think, you know, there's a lot of stuff for veterans there, but it's just, it doesn't have that personal touch. It doesn't have that guidance that I found here. And I think it's important for us as veterans to find something that really resonates with our personality and our character. And it just, for me, everything clicked. It fell into place. I still didn't have any idea what I wanted to do with my business. I am a physical therapist, so naturally, you know, I got to open my own place, right? So that was the thought when I was with you guys in Action Zone. My thought was, I'm going to open a brick and mortar business, and we looked into franchising, and it seemed like that was a good way to go. Deep down in my gut, I just didn't want to. It wasn't my dream to open a building and perform physical therapy for the rest of my life. So yeah, I struggled with that throughout the program, but I got through the program. I met a lot of great people, a lot of great mentors through the Action Zone program. Even some of the participants, some were financial people, which that's a piece that's really not in my wheelhouse. My attorney actually is a guy that Rosie sent me to. So, you know, I'm still using him and keeping in touch. I used one of the guys from our program to do some repairs around my house. He's a contractor. So just a lot of things come full circle. So, you know, even if you don't walk in and walk out of the cohort with, you know, a brand new multi-million-dollar business, you walk out with all these connections and different ideas, places to go with that. So for me, you know, right at the start of the pandemic, it put everything on hold. I was in the process of talking to people for financing for this brick and mortar franchise that would have set me back about 350 grand. And I'm really glad I didn't go ahead and do that, because I think that would have folded very quickly, mainly because my heart wasn't in it to push through and find the resources that would have carried me through the pandemic. So then through the pandemic, I work at the VA, and I became COVID ICU physical therapist, which was by default because I was in a leadership position. So I didn't have a caseload of patients that had to be deferred elsewhere. And it really didn't do anything to my day except keep me from running all of the numbers type of data work that I did on a daily basis. Plus I had that experience with pulmonary physical therapy. And so 18 months later, I went through 2 rounds of this pandemic. We lost a lot of veterans. We had a lot of hard times, but I wouldn't trade working with anyone else in that ICU. Those nurses in our Bay Pines facility were absolutely phenomenal. I can't say enough about the intensive care unit there and the people that I worked with. But as I got through the pandemic and I started to see more healthcare challenges, that little voice inside of me that said, you must create this thing. You must fix healthcare, just kept cropping up. And I feel like, the last 10 to 15 years of my life have been training for this thing that I'm developing. So, motion craft therapy has sat there as a name. So I finally got that attorney that Rosie recommended, and we brought the business from Texas to Florida. Still, I didn't have any real idea what it was going to look like, because all I knew now was it's not going to be that franchise. So I spent, through the pandemic, and I had to get through that. I couldn't leave the VA and all of my patients in the midst of that. But once the Delta virus was kind of fizzled out, we were empty in the ICU. I left the VA in October, and I said, all right, I've got about 6 months worth of money, and I've got 6 months to get my business flying. And I literally, November, December, January, I did zero, nothing. I got to a point where my money was running out, and I got scared that I was gonna, not do anything with my life again. So I took a contract position, and I drove from St. Petersburg to Newport Richey every single day. It was supposed to be a 13-week contract. Thank God they hired a physical therapist full time, and I was able to leave that early, but I did 5 or 6 weeks of that and really solidified, number one, the idea that that is not what I want to do with my life ever again, not even another day. But also, I saw that side of healthcare in private practice before I worked for the VA, when I was doing home care, when I was doing travel PT, where I saw that nobody loved their healthcare. Healthcare is just a disaster. If you're a veteran that goes to the VA, all the complaints about the VA. That I worked there for the past 6 years up until October. And there are some phenomenal people that work there. There are some phenomenal clinicians. So it gets a bad rap in some instances, but I think the responsibility lies on us as this is my healthcare system too. So it has to work. Mm-hmm. So just kind of solidified my idea that I've got to fix this. But prior to, all of the VA work, I was working with civilians. Well, we got to fix that too. Nobody has ever said to me, my healthcare is so amazing and wonderful, everyone should have this. No one says that. We just put up with it because it's all we have.
Right.
So, I've got these 2 things from the civilian sector, from the VA, and I've got experience working in both. And I have my own experience as a veteran. I go to civilian practitioners. I also go to the VA. That's my healthcare system. But it's not working entirely wonderfully. So this overwhelming need to kind of serve people and get people to, know that you deserve better is kind of what has driven my business in a direction that I didn't really expect. But I've written an ebook that should be launching in the next week or 2. And it's just kind of going to explain and give people the empowerment to say, I deserve better. This is what value-based care is all about. Mm-hmm. And you keep hearing that from, if you work in healthcare, you're hearing that, or providing value-based care. Value-based care models are everywhere. But here's the thing. The crappy doctors are still getting paid. So where's the value if there's no accountability for the value? So the thing is that we have to be the accountability. You have to tell them what we require. I require people to actually, give a turd about my healthcare. So, and as a clinician, being in the system and not getting what I needed from it. When I became a therapist, I just made one promise to the industry that I would always listen to my patients. And if you talk to any of them, that's one thing you will find out, that all of my care is based on what their goals are, whatever those might be, because I can't impress them upon my patients. They have to let me know what their goals are so that I can meet those needs. If I'm not meeting those needs, I'm not giving them healthcare that they deserve. So the ebook is kind of a taste of what that should look like. It's like, I feel like I know what healthcare should look like. And so now it's up to us to kind of make a movement toward requiring that.
So when we first met, you were planning to open the physical therapy brick and mortar.
Right.
And then shortly thereafter, you were looking at that franchise model.
Correct.
Correct me if I'm wrong. The next iteration of your idea was online products related to physical therapy.
I was planning to add some manual therapy products. There's a electric foam roller that's out there, which is kind of the precursor to these Theraguns and those type of things. So I was planning to have a website and provide those. But it's still, eventually those kind of things that really work well might be part of, what I put with my website and stuff, but it's not the focus anymore. So the last iteration prior to this was online. I was going to just go online fitness because I'm looking at health, I want people to understand that being healthy looks a lot of different ways. It's not just being 9% body fat and totally ripped, because some of us are a little older, and as our bodies age, that
was really a nice way to say that.
We just really can't fit into those molds anymore. But there are a lot of ways for us to build and maintain muscle mass into later years. And I actually, have a funny story with a patient. We built muscle mass to the point where the physician recognized it. She had shoulder issue. Literally, when she moves her arm, the clavicle pops up in the air. You can see it. It's just, there's no ligaments attaching it. This woman's almost 90 years old.
Oh my goodness.
So I was working on something else. We were doing something with her leg, and I kept seeing, I said, does that hurt? She's like, oh yeah. So when we get done working on this other part, if you want, we can talk to the doctor. I'd like to see some x-rays and see if we can work on that. That would be great. So we got the referral for the shoulder, and I worked with her like 8 or 10 weeks on the shoulder. She went back to the doctor and he said, well, you've built muscle. And you could see she had traps, and when she was moving, this little bone wasn't popping up. The muscle mass actually helped hold it in place, because there's no surgery for someone that age. And even what's going on there surgically, yeah, you can tack it in place, but then that causes a whole lot of other issues. So it was something I didn't really expect to see, but was another thing that lent proof to the fact that we can, improve our health no matter what age, but we have to have the right information.
Right.
So if we're not getting the right information, or we've got a doctor that doesn't even remember who we are from one visit to the next, that's problematic.
And the right information is a global problem, because we've got so much hype about how to solve every single ailment in humanity. And there might be 50 different sales pitches with 50 different programs that are going to cure all of your ills.
Yeah, any one thing, if you're on the grapefruit diet, it might work for a couple of days, but it's not something that's sustainable. Sustainable health is, first of all, stop putting, processed garbage into our bodies. We've got to get away from everything being in a box or a bag or coming out of a takeout window. And that's really the start of it, and that was the other thing. The civilian population in America, the veteran population in America, we need better healthcare. But I've been in the global community now more recently, talking to people from all over the world. And I talked to some folks a couple of days ago from Canada, and they said, yeah, our healthcare is free, but you're going to wait 2.5 years for a hip replacement.
Right.
So is that better? Well, it's free, but does that make it better? So, and we had a lot of discussions about what healthcare looks like all over the world. It's not just, third world countries that they're worse off. In some respects, they're better because they don't have as much processed garbage, although it's infiltrated quite easily and it's causing a lot of problems. So you have to take care of your health, take control of it, and then require your healthcare providers to do the same. So I think that's the direction that I'm going. I really just had some revelations over the last few days, even as to what direction this is going. So, entrepreneurship is not easy, but it's
not a straight line.
No, not at all. And when we first met, Rosie was scaring the bejesus out of me with, you're going to want to do all kinds of businesses. And that's very true, because every time I turn around, I see something like, oh, that could be my business. That could be my business. But maybe in the future, I'll branch out to other things. But right now, what I've done is gone right straight back to that gut feeling and explored that. What is it that I really see myself impacting? What is it that I was put on the planet to do? Because if there's something that you're here to provide and you just know it with every fiber of your being, you'll be provided the things that you need to accomplish that.
I totally believe that.
All you have to do is open up to that.
That's right.
You just say, I'm ready. So put it out there.
And it may not be what you thought it was going to be, just as you've demonstrated with your story. You start on a path, and while you're passionate about a subject, not you in the vernacular, while you're passionate about a subject, as you discover and try to build that business around it, you discover that passion really is deeper seated someplace else.
Right.
And so when you finally get to the core of it, but then you have to also factor in the fact that you have to have the capacity and the willingness to provide the service or products that the customer needs. And we talk about customer, identifying your customer and that pain point. But you can't just stop at the surface. The first most evident pain point isn't necessarily, as any psychologist will tell you, the first excuse somebody gives is not really the reason why they do or behave a certain way. You just got to keep digging deeper. And I think through the evolution of your journeys from end of 2018 to now, I think you've really spent a lot of time and effort, to sometimes forced, you worked at the VA, then you took the contract. We all have to make money and survive, pay our bills.
It's all worthwhile information.
That's right.
Even previous to the VA, I had gone through that process where I worked in nursing homes and things. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do this. But my perspective is different this time, because number one, I didn't have to do the contract. I did it so that I wouldn't use all my money. Right. So it wasn't a desperation move, but also I had been in leadership and I had proven to myself that I could actually do that. I ran programs and I had, a lot of people working for me, and I was actually good at that. So when I went into this, what is almost an entry level position again, I don't have any issue with doing that. I don't mind getting in and doing the work, because I become more of a teacher. So the person that I was working for is very young and coming up through this. I've already been in her position. So I was able to say, you know what, you take this experience and learn from it, but know that this is not how healthcare should be working. And I mean, there were just a lot of things going on there that shouldn't be. And there were quite a few things that I brought up that were really, if you don't do something about this, I'm going to make some calls because this isn't appropriate. So it becomes a teaching opportunity, but it also reminded me this is still happening. I didn't
Mhm.
leave there and then all the problems went away. Healthcare is still really bad for some folks. I mean, just worse than just, I'm not being fixed, or I don't have the right medications, or I can't get a diagnosis. There's worse cases than that where people just aren't being taken care of at all.
Mhm.
And even though the boxes are being checked, like, oh, yep, we do this, we do this, we do this. And then they pass that off to get whatever funding or whatever, but it's not really happening. And so for me, that was more information to say, you know what, this has got to change. I can't be the only person seeing this, but I might be the only person willing to take it on. And that's what makes it my mission.
So do you see your new business concept, the concept that you're working on, as it has evolved to be more one of an advocate or an influencer or
That's
a
a
game
really
changer?
big part of it. I don't see myself leaving out of healthcare. I'll still be coaching, providing healthcare. So I plan to provide health information. I'm still going to do therapy, and I don't know if that will be a capacity of what I'm doing, or if I'll stay with I've got a contract that I'm working, PRN, where I do therapy as needed, and that's working very well. Keeps me where my skills are up, and where I continue to meet people that bring me more knowledge. I learn more from them than they will ever learn from me. But it's just conditions and things that are like, oh my gosh, this needs to be addressed. Things that I would never know if I didn't get in there and do that. I would never know, what, for instance, needs to be done. Some of these folks that just don't want to go to the hospital. Like, if you don't go to the hospital, you may stay in your home and die. I've been doing more nutrition and food counseling with some folks lately, just because that's what's needed. And people don't have any faith in healthcare. And so you have to build that within the person. So I think more so, and like you said, not everybody's your client. Well, none of us believe that. Everybody's my client. I'm going to make money from everybody. And it's not true. And the first time you said you're going to pivot, I was like, I'm not pivoting nothing. This is what I'm doing. She's wrong. I'm not
Like
pivoting.
this.
I've pivoted so many times. I've gone in a complete, not just a circle. It's like a 3-dimensional circle. And the 5 whys are more like 55 whys, because you might dance around your whys with it. Why do you want to do this? Well, I want to take care of my family. I want to do this. I want to provide this to people, but you got to get into the guts of your why. And for me, my why is because somebody has to freaking fix this.
Yeah.
Somebody has to do it. So that's the
I kind of identify with that statement quite a bit, actually.
Somebody's got to do it, and it may as well be me. So, but we've got to start a movement. And I've always said, and I think I said in class one day, I'm one person. I can't be the only voice in the room, because then I'm just a complainer.
Right.
Which is the nice way. I think in the class I said it a different way.
I believe you did.
As a woman, that's a title we always get when we say something and we speak out. Like, oh, here she comes. But if I have 25 people with me, they're like, yeah, we agree with that. Or 250 people, or 250,000 people, or 2.5 million people. Then the people get heard. Because you don't have just legislators making, signing bills and everybody's silent, even though we totally disagree with it. Voting speaks to people, but not in a way that, people demanding, we demand this be better. I don't want to pick one out of 2 things that someone else came up with. It needs to be value-based care. It needs to work.
So tell me about the ebook.
So the ebook is really just, I'm writing a book, but that's going to take quite a while. And I thought the ebook is the best way to kind of bring all of these elements together. So it talks about a little bit about my story, but my story is really just, it was like I wasn't grasping the concept well enough before. So I got injured so that I could see what was going on in the system. It was just a way. It was one of the ways that I could be enlightened to the idea that this needed to be fixed. So I became a therapist because I had bad therapy, not because I really wanted to be a therapist. So, and that makes me different than other therapists, which I didn't even realize till recently, because in fact, right before I was leaving the VA, it got very stressful because I said, if you wanted mediocre, you should not have hired me, because they wanted me to just go into the COVID ICU and do a evaluation. Just, they call it was just one and done, Katie, just one and done, just go in and do the eval and discharge. That didn't save people's lives. And we had a couple people that I know are walking around breathing today because of some of the things that I provided there. So that's the memory. Those are the things I hold on to, because those are the things that are worth it. So it didn't matter what anybody else said to or about me. It was that my commitment was to that veteran. And so that was the biggest struggle leaving, by the way, because I was leaving those veterans.
Yeah, you weren't leaving the hospital and the administration. You were leaving your patients.
You leave management. That's really why people leave. They leave management when they leave jobs. They don't leave the job itself. That's probably the last reason people leave. But I left the bureaucracy, is what I left. And so the patients, it was the hardest thing. But I said, I can either continue helping one at a time, or I can try to help groups. And so I chose to do the next level. But it's really hard to take that step from where you're at, because people depend on you. And some people said that to me. Some people I worked with said, Katie, if you leave, this all goes back the way it was. I said, not if you guys don't let it.
That's right. That's right.
You know, I can only do so much to train people to stand up for themselves. And every place that I've gone, I've done that. And most of the time it goes back to the way it was. But that shouldn't stop me in my tracks, because it limits the potential of what I can do. Like, okay, well, I didn't inspire you guys enough this way. Let's go up here and see if we can inspire from here. And then those little groups, maybe they join together and they come up. But it's a process. And I think for me, I've learned a lot, you know, from you and from Valerie and from Russ. And it's just the start. You know, I had that idea before, but I didn't do anything. It just kind of followed me around.
Yeah, waiting for you to open up and see it for what it was supposed to be. Waiting
for the right venue for me to develop it, which was Action Zone, in my opinion. So, yeah.
Well, I'm glad that I appreciate you saying that, because that's kind of our purpose. You know, we just want to make sure that
I can't say it enough. And I think that everyone should say, I mean, maybe a lot of people take for granted, but what you provide is worth a lot of money. And a lot of business coaches and, you know, small business coaches, they charge a lot of money for this kind of stuff. This is a free service to veterans. Take it and run with it, but don't squander it, you know.
And I think what sets you apart from a lot of people, not all of the people even in Action Zone, because this trait tends to gravitate to us, is that you were ready to receive the information and listen to what you needed to know and then act on it. Even if you didn't act on it immediately,
right?
That was in your head now. And you weren't so, even when you said, I'm never pivoting, you still are understood and we're open to receiving, well, no, I don't want to do that. But what did she mean by that? And what implications does that have for the journey I'm on? And unfortunately, none of us have a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We don't know from day to day, from minute to minute, second to second. But if you have a plan and you have a passion, and when you dive deep enough to figure out what that really is, what that passion really is, how do you want to, you know, I have two things that I think all the time. Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. Correct. And that somebody or something can be me. Right. Even if I'm the cheese standing alone, that I can still do that something. I can do what I can do. I can't do what I can't. Right. But I'm also open to receiving information that helps me identify what I'm supposed to be doing in my life, how I'm supposed to be, the utility I have to my fellow man and to society around us. And then the ability to listen and not manipulate what I'm hearing to fit my scenario of how things should be. And that's a really important trait with starting a business. And I think that's one of the things that sets the military community entrepreneurs apart, is because when you're in service, you have to hear and listen. You can't just, yeah, I already know that and I know what I'm going to do to fix it. You really, the situations are so constantly changing, and in high pressure military combat, even seconds count incredibly. And so you have to train yourself to really take that information in and process it, sometimes at a split second, but then know that you're willing to receive that information. And sometimes if you're not willing to do that, you're going to be stuck in this rut with a business that you don't love.
Right.
It's not as successful as it could.
And, you know, the interesting thing about knowing things is you don't know it until you implement it. You might understand it. You might have heard it before and remembered that you heard it. But if you know, then you have implemented and you're living that. You got to, you know, plan your work and work your plan, as they say.
Yeah.
But, you know, saying, oh, I know. Did you do it? If you didn't do it, then you don't know. You heard it. You understood it. So you recall having heard it before. Oh, yeah, I heard that. You did hear it, but did you do it yet? Because if you didn't do it, you don't know it. Because how is anybody else going to know that you know unless they see it happening? So, and the other thing that I stopped really kind of doing, I was so excited about everything I was planning that I was telling all my friends and family. And then when I would change, I would say, oh, I'm going to do this. Well, what happened to the franchise? What happened to this? What happened to that? I stopped telling people. And I said, you know, like, oh, how's the business coming? You'll know when it happens. You'll know it when I put it out there. Otherwise, it's going to be a surprise.
That's a really good point to make, because we do, first of all, we're passionate about what we do. And so we want to share it, but oftentimes in the early stages of developing that passionate idea, it does change. And we can't expect everybody outside of us to understand how we got to that change and why it's an important distinction to make that change and why it's going to be more profitable or affect the greater good more than the other idea would have. I agree with you. That can be a tough challenge. And sometimes that really derails entrepreneurs. They're like, oh, then all of my family says I should have just done it that way, so I'll just do it that way. But that's not necessarily the right way to go. Like you said, if you're doing it, you know.
Right. And if you do that, it becomes their business, not yours.
That's right.
You know, it's like, and then, you know, at the worst case scenario, if you do that and it doesn't work, then you're feeling this blame and resentment for someone who suggested something that you followed, but who's really to blame? That's right. The one who took the advice in the first place. If you know what you know deep down inside, you've got to go for it. It's almost like you think about the people who will suffer not being able to have whatever it is you're about to offer. That's right. And it doesn't have to be anything profound. It could be the crepe of the week. It could be the pet rock. It could be healthcare or mental health care or suicide prevention or dog treats. I mean, there's a niche for everyone. There's room for everyone to provide something. Yep. You just have to find that inch wide, mile deep. So I do have a patient that I've got to get to. Okay. Well, I so appreciate you sharing with us today. We probably could have talked if neither of us had anything else to do for another 30 minutes or so, but at least appreciate it. Wish you the best of luck. I will put a link to if you will give me a link where you want me to refer people to you so you can at least hear from people. And nothing's completely ready yet. So I'll provide that to you hopefully by the end of this week. And anybody wants to chat with me or talk about Action Zone is welcome to, send me a message on Facebook. It's Katie Antares, and you'll find me there. I'm the only Antares, like the star. Thank you very much. Have a great week. So much. I appreciate you joining us today. Not a problem. Thanks, Rosie. Hi to Cherie. I will. Bye-bye.